Have you ever heard anyone say that something is awfully good? How is that possible? Either something is awful or it's good. How can it be both? How about the phrase crash landing? I think it's safe to say that if you crash something into the ground, that you didn't really land it. Here's another one. Seriously funny. How can something be funny if you're being serious about it? My daughter knows I am serious about my great dad jokes, but she's never said I was seriously funny. Come to think of it, she's never said that any of my jokes were funny at all, and that's pretty serious. Those kinds of phrases are known as oxymorons, and here's a few more examples. A civil war, jumbo shrimp, governmental organization, express mail, peacekeeper missile. Here's one more for you. Nutritional cookie. How can there be a dessert that's nutritional? Is there such a thing? It turns out that there is. They are full of proteins, grains, and vitamins. Now hold on to that fact for just a short minute, because we're going to need those awfully good nutritional cookies later on before they become old news. The theme for this month's services is justice and equity. I want to focus today on the concept of equity. Most people understand the term equality, but may not be as familiar with the concept of equity. It turns out they are not the same thing, and the difference is subtle but important. Equality is based on the mathematical term equal, which means the same as. 1 plus 2 equals or is the same as 3. To treat people with equality means to treat them all the same way. As universalists, we can appreciate the value of equality since we believe that all people deserve to be treated with equal worth and dignity. Sometimes, though, equality is not enough to reach a true state of fairness and justice. Sometimes people need equity. Now, to understand the difference between equality and equity, I'm going to bring back that nutritional cookie, and I apologize, but we are going to do a little math here. Imagine there are 3 people looking for these Nutra cookies, and we happen to have 15 to offer them. Applying equality would dictate that we give each person 5 cookies. That seems fair. But what if we spent a little time talking to all 3 of these folks and found out that person 1 has just eaten dinner, person 2 hasn't eaten since breakfast, and person 3 hasn't had a decent meal in several days? Might that information change how we distribute our Nutri-Snacks? It would be equitable for us to offer more to person 3 than we do for person 2, who in turn would get more than person 1. Equity is more challenging than equality because it involves taking the time to understand what each person actually needs. Equality does not always mean fairness because not all people begin in the same place, under the same conditions, or with the same opportunities. So now we know what equity is, but what does equity look like? Unfortunately, the very country that should be the face of human equity is not. That is because America, despite its Constitution and its stand for democracy, is not a very equitable nation. According to Forbes magazine, the top 10% of the country's population owns 70% of the total wealth. That's a lot of cookies in just a few hands. Many countries in Europe, the Pacific, and elsewhere offer free universal health care, free access to college, a livable minimum wage. They have tough environmental restrictions and have progressive taxation, all of which have been proven to provide greater equity to their populations. America has fiercely resisted all of these things. Why? Why has the country that fought so hard for freedom from tyranny and unfair taxation now become one of the richest but most inequitable countries in the world? One reason is because justice and equity must be rooted in love. You have to care deeply in your heart about the lives of all people in order to be motivated to work for a truly equitable society. And I'm afraid that this country lacks that empathy. And I believe a large part of the blame for this condition must be placed on the very institution that is supposed to teach and spread compassion, the church. People don't often talk about this, but what better place and time to point out this reality than in a church around Valentine's Day? Despite its rhetoric, I think the history of the church in Europe and America has done much to promote class consciousness and division. Let me explain. First, let me say that I am not talking about the thousands of religious leaders and laity of all religions of compassion who have worked tirelessly and with great conviction to help other people live better lives. I am talking about mostly political leaders who have used religion to further their goals of power and control. The first was the Emperor Constantine in the 4th century, who was not himself a Christian, but made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. His mother was Christian and is often credited with turning him toward her faith, but I think it was more likely that he saw how rapidly Christianity was spreading throughout the empire. Early Christianity appealed to the poor and the oppressed, of which there were many in that vast Roman Empire. Secondly, since Jesus had died for them, early Christians were willing to die for him. I think Constantine may have admired that conviction and its appeal to many in his empire. For whatever reason, Constantine made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire, even though he was never baptized himself until the day of his death. The result of his action meant that Christianity, the religion of the poor, of the destitute, of the persecuted, became the religion of the conqueror, the oppressor, and the colonizer. The drive for the expansion of the Roman Empire took place not just for the glory of Rome, but for the glory of God as well. Domination of other cultures became a God-given right because the dominated were not considered human. They were subhuman, the heathen, the people who needed to be conquered, controlled, and converted. Even after the Roman Empire crumbled away, the church continued to develop and maintain power throughout the world. Even kings and queens had to be confirmed by the church in order to be considered legitimate. This domination continued for almost 1,000 years. 1,000 years. Until it was challenged by the Reformation in the 1500s and the thinkers of the Enlightenment in the 1600s. By the time the United States of America was underway, there was a movement to create a country not ruled either by aristocracy or theocracy. The result was freedom and democracy, but only for white males. Non-Christians were still considered heathens and subhuman. It became the country's manifest destiny to conquer, control, and convert the heathens of all lands, whether they were natives, Africans, Chinese, or anyone considered non-American. Our country was built on a slave economy. And even though slavery officially ended with the Emancipation Proclamation, the slave economy continues still today in very similar forms. Large groups of people continue to be paid wages within or below the poverty line and are alienated from the products they produce. Those who have money and the power believe that they deserve what they have, while others are undeserving. Some even go so far as to say that their wealth is a sign from God of God's approval. Therefore, it is the sacred duty of the powerful to fight against every effort to change the system toward greater equity. We may not know what equity looks like here because equity must be rooted in love and compassion rather than status and power. Equity can only be based on a belief in the sacred worth of all people from all religions. Churches like ours, who embrace the moral principles of universalism, can help nudge the country towards equity. As much as it was the duty of the past to conquer, control, and convert, it is our duty now to encourage equity, equality, and egalitarianism. Now I know this may seem like a daunting task, but I want to give you 3 spiritual tools that I believe can help us walk this path, and those tools are to listen, to serve, and to get involved. Just as with our nutritional cookies, equity begins by listening to people, to hear their stories, to find out what they need. When we find out what others require, we can then begin to serve rather than save. We can learn what needs to be done from those who know how to do it. Lastly, we can work to get involved in changing the system. Power and wealth will always coagulate. Neither will ever be freely distributed without pressure. And in our society, pressure comes from fairness in legislation. As long as this country remains a free democracy, we can affect change through legal means, but only if we get involved in the process. Equity begins in love, and love begins in us. To conclude, let me say that I prefer regular cookies, and I prefer equity, because both make life sweeter. In the name of that which you hold in your heart to be most sacred, may it be so.